For our daily cancellation, we begin with a recent article in the Washington Post discussing, as the headline announces, quote, how psychedelic therapy might help with climate change anxiety. Now, the piece is written by a mental health professional named Emily Willow, who starts by describing a recent session with an eco-anxious client. She writes, as our weekly therapy session drew to a close, my patient, a young woman in her early 20s, approaching college graduation, said that she had been feeling a lack of motivation, but that it felt different from her usual depressive symptoms. A worrisome climate change report had recently been published, and she felt paralyzed by uncertainty of what the world is going to look like. She asked, quote, how can I decide where I want to go? Will it even be safe to live in California when I'm older? Many of us are feeling a sense of powerlessness and despair over climate change and its harmful effects. As a psychiatrist, I've noticed a growing trend among patients in my private practice suffering from what mental health professionals are calling eco-anxiety and climate grief. Yes, climate grief, it's called, apparently. The article then goes on to claim that tripping on hallucinogens will somehow make you less delusionally terrified of an ecological apocalypse. Because, of course, if you're having trouble being reasonable and keeping things in perspective, the best thing to do is take LSD. Now, that's what they always recommend for people to help them stay calm and collected. It's why airline pilots are encouraged to drop acid 20 minutes before takeoff. I think I read that once in the FAA handbook. Anyway, I'm not interested in spending any time on the idea that hallucinatory drugs will help you be less anxious about unreasonable things. That's the kind of idea that you would have to already be on drugs to believe in the first place, so it's a moot point. Instead, I want to talk about this underlying concept of climate anxiety, which has been getting a lot of press lately. It's an epidemic on the rise, we're told. Recently, PBS did an explainer on the topic. Watch.
Recently, I've been spending a lot of time reading about climate change, and it's got me feeling anxious, a little tense, a bit frustrated, and I'm definitely worried about the future. And it looks like I'm not alone. People on social media are sharing their anxious feelings and fears about climate change. So much so, there's a name for this. It's called eco-anxiety or climate anxiety. Okay, so this isn't isolated and it's much larger than I thought. So before we go forward, let's practice some mindfulness. Come on, y'all, let's take a deep breath. Come on, deep yoga breath, fill up those lungs, and another. I do have good news. In response to the growing trend of eco-anxiety, clinicians and psychologists are ushering in new techniques to help their clients deal with this issue. We're gonna make it through, y'all. One more breath. The science of ecotherapy or climate-aware therapy is evolving, and there's plenty to learn.
Now, I just want to pause here to give us a moment to reflect on the phrase, the science of climate-aware therapy, which is like saying the science of leprechaun research. Now, it's already a massive stretch to claim that any form of mental therapy is scientific, but the claim becomes even more dubious as you begin adding subgenres, like gender-affirming therapy, climate-aware therapy, and so on. So this is already a load of nonsense, but let's keep watching.
Eco-anxiety is a relatively new term.
Eco-anxiety has been defined by the American Psychological Association as the chronic fear of environmental doom.
That's Britt Ray. She's an expert at the intersection of climate change and mental health. Britt, what are some ways someone might experience climate anxiety?
It can become so intense that it's debilitating, it can impair people's functioning, and then it really does need clinical intervention or support, but it can also trap us in a pit of fear and hopelessness if we aren't careful and get us carried away in kind of a despairing narrative about the future being written off.
Even though someone might be dealing with these symptoms, it might be hard for a therapist to pinpoint the best course of action because eco-anxiety is not in the DSM-5, the manual that health professionals use to diagnose mental health disorders.
Well, don't worry about that, because that will change. Climate anxiety is another way for psychiatrists and pharmaceutical companies to make money, another profitable mental health-related grift, and so it will surely be legitimized in the next edition of the DSM. That is, after all, the DSM's primary function these days. But what can be done about climate anxiety? I mean, that's really the question. What can we do about all this? How can it be treated? Well, let's find out.
The key here to unlocking strategies to deal with your own climate anxiety might have less to do with your individual effort to deter climate change, such as lowering your own greenhouse gas emissions, and more to do with building a climate crisis plan.
There was a recent article in the leading scientific journal Nature that said an important thing that individuals can do to address their climate anxiety is really focus on small aspects that they can control. A lot of anxiety is provoked by the unknown and feeling like you can't control a situation.
Here's what a climate action plan might look like. If you're in a flood zone, consider using personal storage bins that are watertight or moving personal items to a higher level on the shelf. For more info on finding out if you live in a flood zone, check out the description below. Those concerned about drought might want to learn more about urban gardening or drought-resistant forms of agriculture that you can do at home. Now, above all, find yourself a community that is preparing to deal with the next catastrophic event because global warming is happening. Take action and join in on the effort.
There you go. If you're scared about a global catastrophe wiping out all of mankind, one way to cope is to put your belongings in plastic storage bins. Or start gardening. Maybe take the LSD before you go gardening just to make it more interesting. Now, it's worth considering just how limp and superficial this advice is and how inappropriate the whole tone of that video was if you actually buy the claim that the world is coming to an end because of climate change, which the people who made the video supposedly do. So in one breath, they tell us that the end of the world is at hand, and in the next breath, they record a smiley, cheerful video assuring us that plastic storage bins will help us through it. So there seems to be a disconnect here. And this is the kind of disconnect that's very common among climate alarmists. It's why part of me has a hard time believing that anyone in the world is actually this stressed out about climate change. I mean, I've never met anybody like this. I've never encountered in the wild a person who is actually racked with grief and fear because of the environment. I've never had this conversation ever with anyone where they bring up, I'm really troubled right now because of the climate. I've never had that come. Now, granted, if anyone did have that worry, they probably wouldn't share it with me. But still, I've never encountered that. And just for me personally, it's a form of anxiety that I just can't relate to in the slightest. I can't wrap my head around it. I have anxiety about a lot of things, but I've never spent even 1 second of my life worrying about the climate. Well, who doesn't like to have their windshields clean? Haze and film can easily build up on both sides of your car windshield, causing dangerous glare. My new friends at Windshield Wow are the fastest and least hassle way to get a super clean, streak-free, and safe windshield. The Windshield Wow is an innovative windshield cleaning device that uses 2 magnetic cleaning paddles, one on the outside and one on the inside of your car, to clean both sides of your windshield, all from the outside. All you do is push around the outside paddle and the inside follows and cleans the inside automatically. No more struggling to clean the inside. The Windshield Wow applies firm cleaning pressure for you and is super thin to get into those tight dash areas as well. So what are you waiting for? Go to windshieldwow.com. Use code Walsh at checkout for a special discount. That's windshieldwow.com using code Walsh. So if I were to compile a ranking of like the top 500 things I've ever been distressed about in my life, climate change wouldn't make the list. It wouldn't even make it down near the bottom with the most obscure things I've briefly worried about in the past, like brain-eating amoebas and leprosy. It's just not something that makes it onto my psychological carousel of stuff to worry about. That's why I find it hard to fathom those people who are legitimately afflicted by this so-called climate anxiety. But in the end, I do believe that such people exist because the constant apocalyptic hysteria from the media is designed to have this effect on people, and inevitably it will have this effect on some people. So, if you are one of those people who's dealing with climate anxiety, I have 2 things to say to you. Here is some eco-anxiety counseling that might actually help you. And I am trying to help you. I'm not being flippant. I really am. So, the first thing to realize is that you don't need to worry about climate change. Not because the climate isn't changing, but because climates always change. It's what they do, I assure you. It's how they're designed. Nature is in a constant state of flux, changing all the time. There's no reason to worry about this fact. It gets hotter, it gets colder, it rains, it's sunny. This is the way the climate works. You probably don't have to worry about a climate apocalypse. That's not to say that there will never be a climate apocalypse of a sort. I mean, there will be. Eventually, the Earth will become uninhabitable. Look to our neighbor Venus in the solar system, and you'll get an idea of what the Earth will be like one day. Average temperatures of 800 degrees Fahrenheit, clouds of sulfuric acid covering the planet, unbreathable toxic air, just absolute hell. That will be the Earth's fate, but probably not for another 2 or 3 billion years, and you probably won't be around when that happens. Now, in the meantime, you have more pressing concerns. There are thousands of other things more likely to kill you, and one of them eventually will kill you. You'll probably get terminal cancer one day, or die of a heart attack, or in a car accident. Who knows? Maybe you'll be murdered tomorrow. Something terrible will happen to you eventually, and it will have nothing to do with climate change. I'm not sure if this will make you any less anxious, but at least it should make you anxious about more reasonable things. That's all I'm saying. Second point, even if a climate apocalypse was on the immediate horizon, even if we really were barreling towards an Armageddon caused by our SUVs and air conditioning units, there wouldn't be anything we could do about it at this point. And especially if that involves turning off our air conditionings, then we're definitely, I mean, if you tell me that the way to save the world is to turn off my air conditioning and not use air conditioning in the summer, then I guess the world's just going to end, because we're not doing that. So we're screwed anyway, is what I'm saying, by that logic. We're living on borrowed time, simply waiting for Mother Nature to exact her vengeance. And if that's the case, then why worry? Forget the plastic storage bins. Just live your life until the ice caps melt and you're washed away into the sea. There's nothing you can do to stop it. Your fate is already sealed. That may not be a comforting thought, but it is what it is. No point in wasting time wallowing in anxiety over it. Now, fortunately, this is not the case. You will not drown because of climate change. You might still drown. I mean, you could die that way. Maybe you'll slip and hit your head and fall into a hotel pool or something. But it won't be because of climate. It won't be because of climate change. And either way, there's nothing to worry about. You'll die from something else sooner rather than later. You are under a death sentence. In 50 or 60 years, you'll probably be dead. In 100 years, there won't be anyone left to even visit your grave as you are decomposing in the ground. So cheer up, is what I'm saying. And also, I'm saying that climate anxiety is today canceled. Hey, YouTube, thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like access to my full show with no ads, you should go to dailywire.com and use promo code Walsh to get 2 months free on all annual plans. See you there.